When one is overwhelmed by sorrow, it is difficult to find words. These past months, my heart has been heavy with sorrow, each day's tragedies adding to the anguish. Punjab is uppermost in all our minds. The reality that has emerged is not the adequacy or otherwise of the terms of settlement offered by the government on the various Akali Dal demands, but the fact that the agitation is now in the hands of a few who have scant respect for the unity and integrity of our country, or concern for communal harmony, or the continued economic progress of the Punjab. Every 3 or 4 months a new morcha is started, and Punjab is torn by senseless and tragic strife. Terrorists and anti-national elements have gained the upper hand. Innocent people, Sikhs and Hindus have been killed. There is arson, looting and sabotage. Holy shrines have been turned into shelters for criminals and murderers. Their sanctity as places of worship has been undermined. A deliberate and systematic campaign is spreading bitterness and hatred between Hindus and Sikhs. And worst of all, the unity and integrity of our motherland is being openly challenged by a few who find refuge in holy shrines.
However, the Akali Dal refused to respond. There was no option but to let the army help control the situation. Lieutenant General Ranjit Singh Dayal, advisor to the Governor of Punjab, said,
as all of you know, Indian Army is a very religious army. Once the orders are given to them, they follow to the letter. They have been told this is a shrine which is very important to not only the Sikhs, to all Indians, and it will have to be saved at all cost.
5th of June 1984. It had been exactly 1,000 days of terror in Punjab from the day journalist Jagat Narayan was murdered on the highway on the 9th of September 1981. The Indian Army entered the Golden Temple to restore its sanctity. Major General Kuldeep Singh Brar, Divisional Commander, committed to the operations in the Golden Temple complex at Amritsar, describes the sequence of the actual operations in the site.
Important features on this enlargement: Jallianwala Bagh, Hotel Temple View, Akhada, observation towers, Langar, water tank, Guru Ramdas Sarai, SGPC office, Guru Nanak Niwas, Baba Atal Gurdwara, Manji Sahib, the walls enclosing the main Golden Temple complex, Parikrama all around the Sarovar itself, Harmandir Sahib, which is the main sanctum sanctorium of this complex, Akaal Takhat, which was the headquarters of Bhindranwala and all the extremists. As far as the extremists are concerned, the layout of their defenses were extremely well planned. They made very skillful use of ground. They made very skillful use of their firepower, and they sited their defenses in such a way that they brought down effective fire on us, not only within the Golden Temple complex, but even in the approaches towards the Golden Temple complex. On the periphery, you see a large number of houses. These houses, about 20 of them in number, 3-storied, in some cases 4-storied, were occupied by the extremists. Not only did these houses give them early warning, but also extremely good observation, and they were able to bring down fire on us when any troops approached the Golden Temple complex. In addition, for early warning, good observation and attrition, they used the water tank as well as these observation towers, which were totally dominating the entire area. The main entrance, which is shown here, also had 2 very dominating buildings on both sides, and any movement towards the main entrance came under heavy fire from both these buildings, in addition to the main wall itself. This gate on the opposite side was similar to the main entrance and played a similar role on the southern flank. I had also information that the extremists with explosives had planned to blow up the Akaal Takht and, if necessary, Harminder Sahib, if they felt at some stage the game was up and they wished to discredit the army and the government of India, so that world over they would be able to project an image that the Akaal Takht and the Harminder Sahib had been blown up. I had tasked a team of commandos to get into the Akaal Takht and defuse any explosive systems that they could come across so that such an situation doesn't arise. I had infantry tasked to get in from the main entrance and fan out on both sides and get a foothold onto the northern extremity. I also had infantry to break in from the eastern gate and start moving them their way towards the Akaal Takht and secure the southern flank. Whereas, as I said earlier, the commandos were to dash in and carry out their job in the Akaal Takht. That the fortifications were so heavy and the fire so much that I started suffering very heavy casualties on the parikrama. These walls and buildings, some of them three-storied, were occupied on rooftops, the third floor, the second floor, the first floor, as well as the ground floor. They had openings in the walls. They had certain underground shelters or manholes. They emerged from these manholes, fired away at us, got back into these manholes, which were interconnected by tunnels and underground shelters, and appeared elsewhere. So as you can see, the design of battle was initially to take us on from the periphery. The extremists who were sitting on top, on the first floor and the roof floor, my infantry which was moving directly below them, came under grenades. And these were very lethal grenades, a large number of which had been constructed by them in a grenade factory, very innocuously located on top of the eastern gate. So grenades were being hurled down, whereas automatic fire and rifle fire was being directed on my troops who were coming on into this area. The commandos who had rushed and suffered casualties during their rush had been able to get onto this particular spot near Nisan Sahib. They came now under very heavy fire from Harminder Sahib, from the Akaal Takht, and from the buildings across. And I suffered heavy commando casualties. Nonetheless, a stage did come towards about 2 o'clock or so in the morning of the 6th, by which time I had managed a foothold on the northern enclosure as well as on the southern enclosure. We were able to surround the SGPC office, and having entered, Mr. Longowal and Mr. Tora gave themselves up. At this stage, I was getting repeated requests from my subunit commanders and my battalion commanders asking for permission to return fire on Akaal Takht and Harminder Sahib because they were coming under very heavy fire from both these places. As far as Harminder Sahib is concerned, I had to veto this request and pass a very difficult order that under no circumstances will any fire be directed at Harminder Sahib. With the result that I had to suffer many more casualties than I could have otherwise suffered. As far as the Akaal Takht is concerned,
there was no possibility of even closing into Akaal Takht, because now the volume of fire that was brought down on us was an undescribable volume of fire. I was therefore left with no other option but to start engaging those firing positions from which my troops were under very effective fire. And it was at this stage, at about 3 o'clock in the morning, that I brought in an APC, an armored personal carrier, Scott, wheeled, not tracked, onto the parikrama and drove it up to an area somewhere close to the southern gate, in the hope that psychologically this would have an effect and break the will of the terrorists in continuing this fight any further. Out of the 90 commandos which went into this particular point, 46 were casualties. And yet the restrictions were that you will not return fire on Harminder Sahib. The APC, having got into this position, was knocked out by an anti-tank weapon fired from the Akaal Takht within minutes of its arrival. It was now necessary for me, for psychological reasons, to bring one tank forward and the next one slightly ahead. I did use my medium machine guns against him, and about 30 of my boys were able to get into the Akaal Takht. Some of my men got charred in this fire that had now engulfed this area. Therefore, I had to pull out some of my charred men and wounded men and get onto these two flanks on the southern side as well as the northern side and engage the Akaal Takht with fire while I brought in certain more reinforcements. We were at a certain stage in the early hours of the 6th morning left with no other option but to use our direct firing weapons against the Akaal Takht. At that stage, I suddenly found a large fire and smoke as though something had been set afire inside the Akaal Takht. There was then a series of explosions. Perhaps the ammunition and the explosives were going off. With these explosions, portions of the Akaal Takht started crumbling down, and therefore, as you can see for yourself, although some damage to the Akaal Takht has been caused by our action, most of the damage has been caused by the extremists' own action. At that stage, we saw two men move in this particular area who were obviously wounded. We got hold of this chap and put him under arrest. We said, "Where are the rest?" He says, "They're dead." We said, "Where is Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale?" He said, "He's dead." During the rest of that night, we picked up their dead bodies, a large number of our dead bodies, some of their wounded who we couldn't extricate earlier, some of our own wounded, and during the early hours of the 7th, we were carrying out the various formalities as far as dead bodies and wounded is concerned. We kept Mr. Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale's body on a slab of ice till such time his brother, who was a Subedar Major in 61 Engineer Regiment, came down to identify the body. The 7th, midday, I was quite sure now that I was in complete control of the area of the Golden Temple. We are an apolitical army. It's immaterial to us whether it's the Congress or the Lok Dal or the Janta in power. We are totally apolitical. We are multi-religious. Whether we are Hindus, Sikhs, Christians, Muslims, all our soldiers are God-fearing religious men, and they respect each other's religions.
The terrorists had the guidance and professional advice of a disgruntled one-time general, Shubeg Singh, who had been charge-sheeted for corruption. Shubeg Singh's dead body was recovered from the basement of the Akaal Takht. In the Golden Temple complex, the terrorists had a casualty of 493 dead. The weapons recovered from the terrorists included 41 light machine guns, 57 Sten guns, over 500 assorted rifles, including 7.62 mm Chinese self-loading rifles, 2 RPG anti-tank weapons, and a wide assortment of other weapons. Over 3 million rupees of Indian currency, 5,400 grams of gold, besides other valuables, were recovered from the plundered hoardings of the terrorists.
Casualties? We've lost in this operation
83 dead, 248 wounded, a total of 331. The casualty is something like 15 to 20%, which is a very high casualty ratio.
We had to go in without the normal type of covering fire support that you give. However, it meant speaking to the men almost right down to the last man, explaining to them as to why we could not give them the type of support that they normally expect in an operation of this nature. And it warmed my heart to see that they understood. They not only understood, said, "Don't you worry, sir. We know the reasons. We also hold these places holy."
On the 8th of June, even as the President of India and Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, Gyani Zail Singh, visited the temple, a few snipers were heard at a distance. An eminent scholar in Sikh philosophy, the President offered his prayers at the Sanctum Sanctorum on behalf of the 700 million people of India. The Kota Sahib is the main sanctum of the Akaal Takhat, the resting place of the Granth Sahib. While no person is expected to even set his foot on the area immediately above the Kota Sahib, the sacrilegious terrorists had stored large quantities of ammunition right above the sanctum on the first floor. The explosion of these ammunitions caused the final fall of the terrorists, as well as major damage to the Akaal Takht. In spite of all the external damage to the Akaal Takht, the Kota Sahib remained absolutely intact. Perhaps it symbolized the spiritual message: no external damage can affect me, my children of India. I bless you to progress with unity. In the scene of action itself, at Amritsar, although the Golden Temple complex had been cleaned up by removing the unholy men from the holy premises, the temple precincts needed physical cleaning. At the time of the last shooting days of this film, we were witness to an event probably without parallel in history. The army was reverentially engaged in this task. Has any army ever attacked a place and immediately after victory worshipped and renewed the place? The question is not right, because the army did not attack the place at all, but only its unholy occupants. Nor does the army consider it a victory in the traditional sense of a war. From the 8th of June 1984, Gurbani is relayed by All India Radio every day from the Golden Temple complex, a decision for which facilities were not extended earlier by the temple authorities. As a nation, we feel immensely sad, and we pray to the Gurus to restore peace and harmony. The wounds of surgery may take a little time to heal, but the nation will emerge from it more healthy and strong.
कोई नहावे तीरथ कोई हज जा